All right, Mike.
What's up, Tony?
What's up? What are we talking about today?
I think today we're talking about our $150 service call fee. Why do we charge $150 to show up to somebody's house when they don't?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, the obvious thing here, in my opinion, something I was told from a former employee of mine, or employer of mine, should I say. 150 seems high, and it's because we bring our whole shop to you. It's not you bringing your unit to a shop. We have all our tools just all there. We're bringing our entire shop to you. We're bringing all our tools, everything. So that indicates why it's a higher fee. The other thing is, and what we get asked a lot is, hey, I can get a service call from this guy over here for $50, $25. Why are you so much higher than them? And I always come across companies or customers who then call me back and be like, hey, can you come do my service? And I'm like, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, you were having a problem with the 150. What changed? And a lot of times I'll come in and I'll talk to them. They're like, yeah, 3 months ago, I called a company. They said they'd get there for $50. And then they came and said, okay, it's $50 for me to show up. Now it's going to be, a $75 diagnostics fee and a, $30 for me to gauge up to it. And they price every tool has a different price that they grab. I've already paid for my tools. I've already got all my tools. I don't need to charge you individually for each tool. What we do is we go $150. It's going to cover the first hour and of me. It's going to cover my travel to get to you. It's going to cover me diagnosing your system. It's going to cover me if I can get it fixed while I'm there without any parts or any sort of extra. I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to talk to you about it. I'm just going to, it's already covered. You already know the price. So if I can do it in that price, I'm going to do it and I'm going to get it done and get you up and running. It definitely feeds my ego a bit when I go ahead and say, hey, your system's up and running. We're good to go. You just have to pay me that fee and I'm out of here. Your system's awesome. That is a great thing for me. You already know the price. You already know what you're going to pay. It's not anything extra. When it does come extra is when I have to either go get a part or there's a part specific, or just in general, we have to put in a small part. Now, with that, you just pay for the part if we can still do it within that hour. And a lot of times, I've caught myself doing it, I've caught Mike doing it, and I have no problem with it. It may take an hour and a half. It may take 2 hours. But if we can get it done and we're still like, we can do it, it's fine. We're not going to charge you more. Unless we tell you we're charging you more, we're not going to charge you more. That is our price, and that's what you're going to pay until it becomes a situation where, hey, we need a part, we don't have it on our truck, or hey, you need to pay us for this part that we do have on our truck. You're just paying for the part. We're not upcharging you any of hours or anything like that, because we can still get it in that time frame. And for me and for Mike, I've caught Mike doing it, is he's taking out trash for a customer because he's still there. He's like, you got me for an hour. Well, anything else you're concerned about, anything you want, it's not always going to be that way, but I've done it. I've looked at other things on the system, just, hey, I'm still here. You got me for another, 25, 30 minutes. Let me see if there's anything else. And that's also the reason why our maintenance is the same price as our service call. We don't have different pricing for that because we tend to do the same thing. In a maintenance, we check your system from top to bottom. We look at it, we do everything we can to diagnose. And if we catch something on a maintenance, we're still going to diagnose it. We're not going to add to that fee. Hey, there's a problem. We're going to try to see what the solution is to that problem. We're going to figure it out. With a service call, we do the same thing. Mike has gone on calls. I have gone on calls where it has been, hey, you just need a preventative maintenance. Well, you've already paid for it. We just do it. There's no extra, no nothing. Hey, your system's not running properly because you haven't washed your coil or you haven't done X, Y, and Z. We'll just do it real quick and no extra charge. That's why we have that flat rate fee. There's nothing hidden. We're always going to be upfront and honest with you. You're going to pay for parts if they're on our truck, and it's real easy. The other thing is that we don't add, any extra time if it's not going to take us any extra time. You got us for that time. We're going to stay there, try to get it as efficient as possible for your unit if we can. Mike, is there anything else that you'd like to add about that?
No, just to sum it up is that you're paying for our time. You're paying for a diagnosis. So whatever we came to figure out why your system isn't working, we're there as long as it takes to give you that answer for that $150 price.
Yeah.
There isn't a time limit on it, and there isn't a running clock of charges. Until we come back and talk to you and give you a breakdown on what's going on and what it would cost to fix it, there's no additional charge on anything. And like Tony said, if it's simple fix and I just fix it while I'm there, great, you're covered.
Yeah, nothing's hidden, nothing. We don't like to hit any surprise and stuff. Now, when it does come to pricing on parts, we can look it up. We have access on our phones to look up pricing of equipment. We can give a general idea of what the price is going to be on a part for most equipment. If it's general parts, if it's general, universal parts, we can tend to get that information. When it comes to, say, OEM parts, which we would prefer to use as much as possible, because it's what the system was designed for, it's what that system requires, we prefer to get those OEM. Those parts tend to be variant in prices. There's no nice little sheet that gives us all the prices of everything. We go and individually set those prices for each customer. We don't have a la carte pricing where we go, hey, the average cost of this motor is X. We're going to add, say, hey, we see more of the more expensive motors, so we're going to go this, and then we end up having this huge price on a fan motor because certain people do have very expensive fan motors, and we go, okay, those people have very expensive fan motors. We tend to do so much. We do all this calculation. We go, okay, the average is going to be this. This is what we're going to charge you. Okay, but what if you have one of those cheap motors? Why are you paying more? Just because the average of everyone else is more doesn't mean that you should be paying more. So we do individual pricing. We price per the customer for what they need and what they are to spend. Because again, I could be the X13 motor. Every technician does not like the X13 motor and they still use them. They're a very expensive motor. And those tends to be the times when I go, okay, how old's the unit? All right, let's not go with the OEM X13 motor. It is way too expensive. Let's go with the universal. It's still expensive, but cheaper, and it does the same thing. It is literally designed to replace the X13 motor, so I'm comfortable using that motor. I've had very few, if any, problems using the universal for that, and we can save money in that case. But it's still significantly more expensive, even the universal one, than your basic single speed fan motor that your unit would require. So I don't feel comfortable charging someone with a cheaper motor the more expensive price just because we put a la carte pricing on an average. I'd rather, hey, this is what it costs, this is what it'll take, go ahead and charge you for what you need, not charge you because some other people need something more expensive. That's why we tend to do the individual pricing for individual equipment so that you get a more precise and a more accurate to what you're paying for. You're not paying for someone else's equipment, a little bit of their motor, a little bit of this person's motor. You have this equipment, this is what it takes, this is the cost, we're going to charge you for that specific unit on what you have. We tend not to have those numbers rattling in their head. And I think Mike explained it best earlier on how he feels about that. You want to get into that about, you know, your thought process of just being on service?
Yeah, so a big reason why we have decided to go with the pricing structure that we have and why we charge the amount that we do to show up to your house and provide the diagnostics is I've worked for another HVAC company in a past life, and that company didn't charge very much for me to show up to a house. What that did for me as a technician was put a lot of pressure on me being there to justify why I was there. So I, for one, would have to make a diagnosis as fast as possible because I have other calls stacked up throughout the day because I'm only making small amounts per call, potentially. And it puts a really hard pressure on a technician and gives me a lot more to think about than just what could be wrong with this system. It's more, becomes a time management problem. And that's not something that we want to be facing, and it's not something that we want our future employees to be facing. I don't want a technician to show up to a house and worry about making sense for them to be there, because they're there to fix a problem. That's why you're there. Whatever that problem may be, however long it may take, you're there to fix that problem. And until you know what it is, you can't fix it. So it might take 2 hours to figure out what it is. It might take 5 minutes to figure out what it is. Either way, I don't want you stressing about that time. And I don't want to stress about that time, and I don't think Tony wants to stress about that time.
No.
So that's a big reason why is I don't want, and we don't want anybody to show up to a house and have to justify a reason for being there by finding something wrong. Because there might not be something wrong, at least not something major. Could be a loose wire.
Yeah, I mean, I could cite when I first started in the industry, my background has always been commercial, but I've done residential as, you know, for family members when I first started out. And I got a call from a, you know, relative of mine and said, hey, my parents just got a quote for a new unit. The unit's not that old. Is there anything that, you know, you can do to just double check, make sure that they actually need a new unit? And I had no time crunch because I wasn't going to charge them their family. And so I went there and I went through the diagnosis and I'm like, yeah, this unit isn't running. Well, let me dig in deeper. Let me see why. And so I dug in. I started going through all my checks. And it turns out that it was just condensation buildup in a vacuum line. And all I had to do was just clear that line and the system runs fine. And if that technician that came wasn't so pressured, and I can't speculate, I can only speculate on what it was. It could have been pressure of time management. He didn't have enough time to go through and try to diagnose it, or it was that he, you know, needed to justify his time there, and he may have found it, and, you know, that cost nothing. That he had no parts to replace. That's too much pressure for a technician to be under. You shouldn't be a salesman and a technician. You're a technician. You should just diagnose and do your job and be, you know, honest with your customer. You should do what they need, you know, and in a time that you feel that is necessary. You don't need to justify. Technicians shouldn't have to justify their time. Technicians shouldn't have to, you know, try to make money because they are charging so little for a service call or whatnot, so that they rake up the prices. They got to be profitable. Listen, when it comes to being a technician and being, especially in a service in an industry that there's so few people that know about this stuff, you know, you guys are relying on us to be educated, to know what the issue is, and you are relying truthfully on trusting. I mean, think about it. You are asking us to come into your home to check on your unit of which you know nothing about, and there's no reason for you to ever know anything about. All you need to know is, hey, I have it in cooling. it's not cooling, or hey, I haven't heat, it's not heating. You rely on us for that information, rely on us for that knowledge, and you have to trust us to do that. When you have all these outside factors of time restraints, of profitability, you're worried about your job and stuff like that, the technician shouldn't have that much pressure on them. And that's why we tend to just go, hey, 150, and the technician will be there till he figures out what's wrong with it. And sometimes it can be done because he had enough time to blow out that condensation that was in that vacuum line. Or sometimes it's, hey, I figured out what's wrong, we need to replace it. So those are the things that we want to avoid, and that's one of the reasons why we just do a flat fee for us to figure out what's wrong with your unit. The other thing that we don't do is we don't tend to have all those prices in our heads. A lot of customers will come to us and say, hey, how much is this going to cost on, a fan motor being replaced, and we're looking for an OEM. I'm not going to have that just off the top of my head. I don't have a price sheet. It's going to be based off of what you have and everything, and sometimes I have to call a vendor, or most of the time we call the office. Call the office and say, hey, we need a pricing on this motor, we need a price on what this is. We have a general idea of how long it'll take just off of us looking at it. Hey, that motor's pretty easy to replace, it'll probably take us about an hour. Then the office comes and says, hey, this is the price for this specific customer. It's not hey, this is what we generally charge. This is the average. No, we want to give you an exact price as much as we can so that you know what you're paying for, you know what you are being charged, and there's no extra hidden fees in any of it.
Yep.
The things that I try to touch on with service calls with all my customers, and I try to, everything I say is, when we show up, we would prefer that you're there with us. It serves two purposes. One, we have no problem, we have nothing to hide from you guys on what we're doing. We're going to show you every diagnostics we do, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us. Two, you can see the reasoning. You can see, you are more educated in why this part needs to be replaced. There's a couple, and very, very few, but there are a couple of situations where we go, okay, contactor's not working, it's blown, it's not working. Now we want to know why that contactor isn't working. Now we can do some things, and we can show you the things that we do to see if there's anything that could be a factor, but a lot of times we have to first replace that contactor, then do another diagnostics, which won't be an extra fee. We don't charge an extra diagnostics fee, but we will do a second diagnosis to see why that part went out. The last thing you want to do is replace a contactor every month or every 6 months. You want to know what's causing that contactor to go out, and we do too. We are too stubborn to let a unit defeat us. We want to know, we want that system to run as best as we can, and so we will do that extra diagnostics. One, for our peace of mind, because the last thing I want, I get a heart panic in my chest if I get a customer calling me after I just did a maintenance. And luckily, so far, I haven't had any issues of customers complaining. They're typically asking, hey, where do I leave a review? Or, hey, I saw this, just wondering what was up. Yeah, knock on wood. But a lot of times we want to do that extra for our peace of mind, and just for our peace of mind alone. It's not so that we can charge you more, we can find more stuff. Sometimes we do. Sometimes it's a general just, hey, you have a lot of power surges, you have, things that, are outside of our ability to stop. I've had one customer have a capacitor that went out, and then I replaced the capacitor, and then he called up, 6 months later and said, hey, the system's not working. and he thinks it's the capacitor. I'm like, oh no, I just replaced that. And I came in, turned out he had a major power surge and it tripped the breaker. It was nothing major. I just had to flip the breaker back over. And I asked him, I was like, hey, because again, we always try to figure a reason for this to happen. Checked amps, checked everything. Turned out he was just he had a lot of, dirty power coming in from the power outages and stuff. So we try to do as best we can to figure a reason why the equipment, it's just because a part's bad, our job doesn't end there. We want to make sure if there's a reason why that went bad so that we can fix it appropriately so that this issue is avoided in the future.
The biggest advantage that I've found for our customers with our service call pricing comes from low refrigerant charge calls, or units not keeping up and their system's low on refrigerant, or it's had a leak, something like that. Because the feedback that I've gotten, at least from customers when we've been their second call or their second opinion, is that another company won't even try to find the leak or the reason why the system's lost refrigerant. They'll offer to put more in, they'll offer to charge for that, but they don't proceed with the diagnostic procedure to figure out why the system's lost refrigerant. With our pricing, that's included. That's just a given. I cannot walk up to a system and just say, well, it's low on refrigerant, you're gonna need more. I need to find out why, and I need to know where it went, because it's irresponsible for us as HVAC technicians to just keep putting refrigerant into a system knowing that it's leaking, knowing that it's going somewhere. So that's probably one of the biggest advantages as far as our pricing goes, is for any customer that needs a leak check or is having a problem with their system that's related to low refrigerant charge. Because we're going to find out why, and we're going to show you pictures, and we're going to give you a repair plan on how to fix that leak.
Yeah, and on that, that's there are fringe situations where it's a very small leak and our leak detector or our visual inspection doesn't come up, and sometimes we do have to do the more dramatic leak tests. There's a pressure test that we can do that is typically a little bit more extreme in ways of how long it takes. We have to actually pressurize your system, recover the refrigerant, pressurize your system. That becomes a little bit more, but most of the time we know from years of experience where the most common spots of those leaks are. And we're just going to go ahead and go look at those. We're going to look at where wires are rubbing on your refrigerant lines. We're going to take our sniffer and sniff around your coils. We're going to check Schrader cores. We're going to check those just because we're there. And we don't need to charge you extra to do a general check of your system of where that leak is at. And most of the time, we can find it. And if we can find it, most of the time in those situations, we can repair it. There are some fringe times where it's in a spot that can't be repaired, or in a spot that we can't really get to. Like sometimes it's been a screw inside of a wall that has taken a refrigerant line. Those are harder to find because it's in a wall. It's not visible. It's not easy to detect. We can't get our sniffer up in your wall. But those are the things where we will still do it. And we're not going to charge you more to just do a basic refrigerant leak test on the most common spots that there are to leak test. And like I said, most of the time we find them, and that's the ideal situation, because I don't want to be charging you for refrigerant and then coming back 6 months later and putting more refrigerant in, and then coming back another 6 months and putting more refrigerant. That's a lot of unnecessary money spent.
Very expensive.
Very
unnecessary.
Yeah. So if someone says, hey, you need to top off your charge, we just need to add a little extra, you want to know why. Why? Did we lose charge? Was it somewhere else? And I'll tell you what, gas does not deteriorate over time. It's a sealed system. There's nothing about any sort of refrigerant just losing its capacity. That is not true. I don't know how many times I've heard that, where, oh, they just needed to add a little, or they needed to boost the charge, or they needed to refresh the charge on the system. It's not true. CO2 will be CO2 regardless. Oxygen is oxygen regardless. Gas is gas regardless. There is nothing that changes that system unless something has happened to it. So if it's just running normal, your unit is fine. You don't need to put any sort of special crystals in your refrigerant lines. You don't need to do any of that. It's an element. It's gas. It will stay. There is no changing that element. You're not adding anything extra. If they need to add charge to the system, it's because it lost it somewhere, and we should find out where. There are times when it's just slightly low on charge, and we ask our customers, hey, how many technicians have you had look at this in its lifetime? I've had, I get a guy comes out once every 3 months and gauges up to it, checks charge. Well, our refrigerant gauges take a little bit of charge out of the system every time we gauge up to it. So again, I try to avoid gauging up to systems because I could check if your unit has the proper amount of charge within relative ranges, which is checking split across the coil, which is checking amp draw on your compressor. I can get a general sense of, okay, this unit is well charged. I don't need to keep on gauging up to that system, losing a little bit of refrigerant every time I do. And then, eventually, with pulling refrigerant out a little bit at a time, eventually you are going to be low on charge. So sometimes I look at it, I'm like, you're just barely icing up, you're barely under charge. It will take less than a pound to get you back where you need to be. Then I can go ahead, okay, I think the problem was that you had too many people gauging up to the system, it lost a little bit. But other than that very, minimal thing that would ever happen, because most people don't have technicians showing up every 3 months to do it, there is a reason why that refrigerant left, and that's why we just go ahead and go through it. Want to make sure, and if we even see a potential, a lot of times wires are rubbing up against a copper line, and I can see that it's a potential to cause a leak. I will strap that up, and I'm not going to charge you for it. I'm just going to make sure that I avoid, our biggest fear is the customer calling us up and saying, hey, you were just out here, and now this is a problem, and it's nothing that we mentioned on a maintenance. So we want to make sure that we're thorough, we take care of it, and we try to prevent anything from happening. Especially on a service call. I could be on a service call for a contactor that goes up, and I'll notice something else on your unit that I can do to avoid a future service call. I'm going to do it. I have no problem doing it. That's what's covered in our fee.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mike? I think we kind of basically covered it.
Over-covered it.
Yeah, and again, this is our notes. It's very little. Most of this came off what we actually truly believe and how we want our company to operate. There's nothing that we wrote down to try to, script it or anything like that. This is our full and honest opinion, and we're in agreement on how we want our company to move forward and deal with our customers. Our customers are first. Customer, employee, company will take care of itself.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, everybody.